What's up YouTube? Eric here with MajorLeagueTrading.com, and in this video I'm going to review my largest percentage gain trade ever using options. So I was able to capture a 4,980% return on some SPX options today, given the insane move that we had. Now, I was buying these contracts for 50 cents, and the highest sale that I got on my final exit was $24.90, and I was taking some out along the way, obviously. Now, I want to talk through just the psychology around what it is I was looking at, what I was thinking coming into the day, and then also the triggers and the strategy behind why I was able to get into the trade, what it was that allowed me to enter the trade, because typically I'm not buying downtrends. I'm not buying markets that are moving lower. I like to go with the trend. But this morning, we were actually getting a really big gap down, and we had just moved 140 points off of some CPI numbers. And then 12 minutes into the day, I'm actually stepping in to the long side. So what is it that I saw? Well, let's dive in and take a look at the charts here, and we'll go through some of those things for today's action. Now, I did say that this was my largest percentage gain trade ever, but it wasn't my largest dollar gain trade ever. And it ended up being a really nice trade, don't get me wrong. But I think what's more important here is the mechanics behind why I took the trade and the sizing in which I took, because it was kind of an outlandish idea for the trade, and all of those things, and then tying those into your own risk metrics. And again, utilizing the strategy, which is one I've talked about before, which is actually the divergence strategy. So if you guys have watched any of my other YouTube videos, I talk about the divergence strategy all of the time. Besides the levels, that is the only other thing in which I do. So let's dive into the charts here. And the first thing in which we have to take a look at here to really kind of understand the premise for the trade idea for today was, again, weekly chart here. We talked about this lower high back here in March. I was calling for a lower high here off of SPY. This is the S&P futures. I like to chart these, and I also will chart the SPY. I'll reference both back and forth throughout the day. And essentially what I was looking for from here was a weekly downtrend to go in place. Now, I am not the best short side trader, and I know that. So given that I see this, okay, I'm looking at different opportunities, and I have adapted and been able to, trade the same way in which I do on the long side with smaller size using puts. I'm not as comfortable in that direction. But today we had an opportunity to step in and go long, and when we take a look at this weekly chart, it tells us, okay, we're in a pretty decent weekly downtrend. And I was kind of looking for us to make a move down towards, 3350s, 3400s or so. And we ended up trading 3502s today. But what I ended up, kind of seeing here was, okay, we've got a nice daily sell setup. It triggers on the gap. We're 1, 2, 3, 4 days down. We had acted super weak all week long, and we had a couple levels in place here. We had 3590s to the downside that needed a crack, and we had 3637s to the upside that needed to break. Now, when this news came out here at 8:30 this morning, we actually traded up through these 3637s and then immediately got smacked down here, and we're trading under those 3590s. And this was a really big bar. I mean, 116 points for the S&Ps in 5 minutes. That might be one of the largest bars that I think I've ever seen. We ended up with 195 points range on the day, massive green bar, and that's probably in the top 5 biggest ranges that I've seen over the past 11 years. Now, as we move forward and the S&P starts trading 5,000, 10,000 in 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it is, 200-point days are not going to be quite the same as they are now. But with COVID and all of those things, we've seen some crazy moves. This one, definitely in the top 5. So As we get this move lower this morning, I end up actually stepping away from the desk. Normally, I'm at the desk and we're getting news, and then I'll start writing my plan after that. I ended up seeing this move and I walked away from the desk, and I didn't come sit back down until about 9:10 this morning. And the reason why is I didn't know what this was continuation was going to get from this. I didn't want to watch this action and just try and do something inside of here after this massive move to the downside, thinking that I was going to miss something. So not that I really had FOMO, but I didn't know what to do. So I didn't want to do anything. So I just stepped away for that first little bit of what I would normally do my morning analysis with. And I came into the day with a completely clear, open head as to, hey, and I even wrote this. I said, hey, I want to let the market prove to me what it wants to do on the day. And as always, I'm willing to take a divergence trade. Now, one thing to note here that I talked about, or that I said last night here, so this was 1:12 in the morning. I woke up, I checked quotes, and I punched this into the Discord. And I said, a big gap down tomorrow could be a long, couple days down, then like a 50-point exhaustion gap that fails to go lower, and we work back into the gap. Small gap in either direction would be the worst thing to see, I think. Now, we ended up getting that 50-point gap down, and it ended up being an exhaustion gap. That's the big kind of thing for this trade is, like I said, we've got the daily sell set up. We're selling off here 1, 2, 3, 4 days to the downside, and we're getting this big gap to the downside the next morning. So now I need to see, okay, is this actually exhausted, and can I step into the long side? So if we take a look at the VIX this morning, this was really, and I'll switch this back over to like a 2-minute here. If we take a look at the VIX this morning, this was really kind of a tell for me. So this is a 5-minute chart of the VIX here. And, I'm kind of watching and I'm going, okay, we're basically unchanged to actually, small red in the VIX. So we had a massive move lower in the overall indices, and the VIX here was just not really saying, hey, like I'm going to go lower or I'm going to go higher and the market's going to continue lower. So it was kind of giving me that vibe that, okay, something's off here. My highs from yesterday were all the way up at 34.53s. I'm currently like 33.50s. I'm a full point off of those highs. Meanwhile, the S&Ps are, like 2% plus lower overall on the day. We closed here at 35.90s. We're opening, basically down here at 3,500. So we're actually closer to like 2.5% to the downside on the day. Meanwhile, VIX isn't really doing anything for us. So when I saw that, I said, okay, let me look for some other reason, something else to say, hey, this could be the exhaustion gap to the downside. Now, one thing that I will point out here that I've been talking about and waiting for quite a while was right here last Sunday night. We ended up getting a little bit of kind of funky action here in the markets in the overnight session. S&P futures, they open at 6 o'clock Eastern on Sunday night, so that's when I start checking quotes. And here at, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, coming into the 9 o'clock on Sunday night, we had actually traded down here into 35.71.75s. Now, I'm going to just shade this line here so you guys can see it. Well, that was back, all the way back in here. That was last Sunday night, right? And we never tested that level again until today, right? So when we fast forward, I don't know, what is that? Essentially 7 days, almost 11 days later now, we had not tested this 35.71 level here in the S&Ps. And I've been talking about this and going, hey, I'm not too sure that we're like ready to go quite higher yet. The NASDAQ did test its level the other day and was able to get a pretty decent bounce from that. That level was like 10,890s, and we got a pretty decent bounce from that. I think it was like 150 points in the NASDAQ pretty much right away. But the S&Ps left it untested. So that was pretty important for me, is like, hey, let's go test that level at some point. And that was kind of my thinking behind the whole exhaustion gap was, okay, let's, we closed at 35.91. Let's get a 50-point exhaustion gap down here towards 35.40s. And then it's basically just a novice gap down, right? We've got so many bars on the daily chart in one direction here, and we get a gap down and we fade that move. This you will see during earnings season as kind of an end of the trend type of move. To whereas a pro gap or a gap over red or a gap under green, for example, is going to change the potential trend. Something like what we have today in DPZ. DPZ is actually a bullish gap to the upside here, and it's potentially changing the trend on the daily chart. The novice gap we saw, the exhaustion gap we saw today in the S&Ps could lead, in fact, to the same thing. Now, that's two parts of the three that were coming together in order to allow me into this trade. The third and kind of final part here, which is really, really minute and kind of detail-oriented, but it's the divergence strategy. So for those of you that don't know, the divergence strategy is one in which you watch the four main indices here. So I'm giving you guys a completely free strategy right here. And when one market breaks either highs or lows, and the other three don't, that is a divergence. So you may have seen like MACD divergences where, market comes up, makes a high, MACD makes a high, market comes up, makes a new high, and MACD like makes a lower high, essentially, if you will. This is kind of the same thing, but I'm watching purely just price. And what I noticed and what allowed me to take my entry was that the Russell actually came down and got new lows about 10 minutes into the day. On this 940 bar here, you can see this is the low here at 1643.80s, prior lows being 1645.90s, prior lows on this bar being 1646.40s. So the Russell actually made essentially two more lows, to whereas the rest of the other three markets were holding that first 5-minute low print. So that's the third thing in which I saw, right? Which is, okay, we've got S&Ps, NASDAQ, and Dow essentially all putting in potentially higher lows at this point. And we've got the Russell with the divergence giving us new lows on the day right here. So super small detail thing with that, right? So you combine the daily chart with the big gap down in the exhaustion. You combine the VIX with the fact that it was, really super weak all day. I mean, VIX closed down really nicely here. And you combine all of those things then with the fact that we were able to get those untested lows here of 35.71.75s. And then the final thing in which kind of came together for this was that we were able to change trend very, very small on a 2-minute chart that allowed me to take an entry here into this position. Now, here's the position. It was the 3,600 calls for the SPX. They expired today. And you can see my first, or my only entry really, was down here at 50 cents a piece. So it was good for, $7,185 on the day. And then you can see this is where I was able to go ahead and take my exits on those. Now, this right here, it'll show you, if I hover over that, it'll show you I got out some at 760, 1490, 1990, and then 2490s. This bar went absolutely crazy, and I was getting the order fills before the bar was even able to print the fact that it had traded up to the levels or not. When I saw that, or when I heard the ding and looked at my chart, this was still printing like $13, and I had already gotten filled on my 2490s. So this thing was moving super fast. You can see there was a lot of volume that came in on this bar. Toss was a little bit delayed on updating the charts and all of that. Things were moving. So I was able to step in here, and we'll drill down. We'll make this a little bit tighter here to a 2-minute chart. And you can see this right here was when I got in, 9:42. Now, like I said, this was that 2-minute trend change in the S&Ps. So we come down, we open, we set lows, we rally, we set highs, we pull back, we set what is potentially going to become higher lows. And then on this bar, when we actually break out through these highs here on the 942 bar, which is when I took my entry, right? Sorry, right there, 942 bar. When I took my entry, that was us breaking through those highs and confirming a small time frame uptrend on a 2-minute chart. So I used the weekly, the daily, that level from like 11 days ago on the Sunday night, the VIX, the divergence, combined all of those things down into the 2-minute chart in order to go, okay, here's the position, here's the entry into this position. Now, as we can see, and we kind of scroll forward here, my initial plan for this trade, which is what I ended up following here, was that if this trade works out, I want to go ahead and take half off at a double, and then this trade becomes completely risk-free to me at that point. And I had targets on the day here for the SPX at 36.2372s. Now, if we look at the overall SPY and all of these things, that same level is 361.40. Again, S&Ps, SPY, SPX, it's all basically the same exact thing. You're going to have small differences in your levels. Now, since I'm on the SPY, I want to talk about this real quick. This was a picture I put up on my Instagram story, just kind of chronologically detailing some of these things, right? So 9:46, this is a couple minutes after I got into the position, right? This is on this bar right here. So this is giving us our next 2-minute buy. So I took the early entry on the change of trend. We get a nice 2-minute pullback here. For those of you that have taken the mentorship, you know exactly what this pattern is and what this 2-minute buy setup is and how in which to take it and stops and targets and all of those things based on levels. So I went ahead and called that out in the room at 9:46. 2-minute buy from opening, OP is opening print, right? 9:53, I'm talking about the S&Ps here. I'm talking about, can we fade 100 points? 10:06 a.m., I said, call me crazy, but I think the SPY might close over 361.40s. That's this level right here. In fact, we closed like 4 points above that level on the day, which again is pretty nutty. I didn't think it was going to go quite that far. And then at 10:17, I said, I think we might close green on the day. 11:15, Mumbo stepped in here and he said, here we go, green. Eric called it, and that was right in through here as we turned green on the day. Now, there's a couple things to this. Number one being like the target, right? So what was I expecting for a target hit on this trade? Well, ultimately, I was kind of looking up towards those 361.40s for the SPY, and I was looking for this 44.75s, which was our pre-market high from that 8:30 news announcement. Now, very much the same thing where I was looking at these 35.71.75s from the previous Sunday night sessions to come and finally trade. Today, I was thinking, okay, if this can change trend, it can hold trend, and it can do the things that I'm thinking it can do, we should kind of trade back up in and test that 36.44.75s, which we did. And we got a really nice reaction off of that level. I mean, we traded up into 36.48.50s, and then we traded on this pullback right here down to 36.12 quarters. So that's like a 36-point pullback right inside of this move right here. That's a really solid reaction in the S&Ps. And I honestly thought that I thought we were done at that point. I'm like, okay, and I'm already out of my position by this point, right? I was able to get fills on this bar here at 11.16. We end up making and punching those highs right here on the 11.20 bar up into that area. So I had already gotten essentially what my targets were, right? Again, 36, 23, 72s. Again, that's why I was using basically that $25 number as a target. I got the 3,600 calls. I'm looking at 36.25, and that's why that was my last kind of print for a target. So I just had those orders already stacked in there in the event that the market wanted to rally. And I was contemplating actually leaving the desk before these even got filled and just let them work, right? I had already taken off half the position. It was risk-free. If it came back to zero on the day from, $4, $5, $6, okay, I gave back a few grand of potential open profits. So be it, right? That was kind of my thinking behind the trade initially. And I'd already put these orders in, so I could have walked away. It just ended up moving really, really nicely and held and just kept on trucking to the upside here. So I just sat at the desk and sat on my hands and let it do its thing here on the way up. So anyways, I don't think there's really much else to cover with this trade. Ends up being a really, really nice trade overall. Again, biggest percentage gainer I've ever had. It went another like 300% from my exit. What do we close on the day here with these contracts? Like, yeah, basically $72. It traded all the way up to a highs of 85 and change. Actually 84.90s on the high print there. So, again, overall, really, really crazy move. And I'm going to speculate to this, and I don't know that I'm necessarily right or wrong on this, but again, we were 100 points out of the money. Had the VIX rallied and seen some type of comparable move to the overall indices move, right? I don't think those contracts would have been as cheap as they were. So they seemed really, really cheap when I took the position, given that just, 30 minutes, well, not 30 minutes, but, an hour prior, we were basically at these levels. I mean, we were above 35.90s here, which would have been, kind of the gap fill area, right? We were printing, 36.44s. So 140 point drop in 10 minutes, 116 points of it being in this 1 5-minute bar. It's not unreasonable to expect that we could make that move back throughout the course of the day. And these options are only priced at 50 cents. So anyways, that's what I've got for you guys tonight in this trade review video here for the SPX position. I don't know if I'll ever have another, 4,980% trade. It could have been a whole lot more, obviously, but again, you can say coulda, woulda, shoulda, whatever the case is. I followed my plan, my rules, and everything that I do each and every single day, the same exact thing for this trade, and I would do the exact same thing again on the next trade and not say shoulda, woulda, coulda, right? So if you have some extreme FOMO over this move and you're watching this tonight, either Thursday, Friday night, after this type of move, I did not expect this type of move. I think it was really, really hard to say that it was going to be as big of a move as it actually ended up being. And being able to hold a position that you picked up for 50 cents and it turns into $70 contracts is really tough, right? Like at a certain point, yeah, I put $500 into this position, which is smaller than my normal capital usage per trade or even risk per trade, right? So I could have gone a whole lot bigger on this trade. But to say that you could have held from $60 all the way back to basically $30 holding 10 contracts when you just lost 30 grand in open profits on this type of trade in order to hold the full thing, all of those, right? It's really, really difficult to do that. So I say all of that to say, don't beat yourself up about this one particular trade or the fact that you may have missed it or had it on and took it off or whatever the case is, because at the end of the day, the market is open tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And it's always going to be here, and there's going to be other opportunities in this market. And the biggest thing is to make sure in which you keep your mentals in line. You have all of these strategies and tools and things, confirmations that you're looking for in order to take your trades. And when you're able to catch big moves like this, they work, right? But again, if you're not in the right mental framework, you're not going to be able to capture these moves. So anyways, that's what I got for tonight's video. Thank you guys if you've watched all the way till this point. Give me a thumbs up, like it, comment it, heart it, share it, do whatever. And I'll catch you guys on the next video. Take care.